James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Billingslea, can you start with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Detroit, Michigan, June 29, 1947.
Okay. Did you grow up there?
I grew up in Detroit, yes.
Okay. And what was your family doing for a living while you were growing up?
Well, my dad was a career soldier, so he was never around.
Mm-hmm.
My mom and my great-grandmother actually raised myself and my siblings. My mom worked in the school system for a while, finally got a job with the state, working at state hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my great-grandmother was already retired, so she was always home. Basically, that was it. We were pretty poor. Grew up on the east side of Detroit, went to Pershing High School.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I'm not sure, what was your father, like a senior sergeant sort of thing? Or?
Oh, he was a sergeant major.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So about as high as you can go up in the enlisted
Yes,
ranks
yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
But that still didn't pay particularly well at that time.
No. Well, I mean, he sent money home,
Mm-hmm.
but shortly after my brother was born, the one next to me, my mother and father divorced.
Oh, okay.
And of course, he stayed in the military.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you really are kind of on your own at that point.
Right.
Okay. Did you finish high school?
Yes, I did.
That's right. You went to Pershing. Okay. When did you graduate?
1965.
Okay. And then once you graduated from high school, what did you do?
Actually, I went to work for Chrysler. Initially, had worked since I was 14, but I got a good job at Chrysler. Worked there about, I don't know, 9 months, and actually got fired. And they agreed to bring me back, but it was too late. I was drafted. Went to work for TRW Corporation in Warren, Michigan, just before I was drafted in '66.
Okay. Now, of course, your employment status wouldn't really have affected the draft, though, right? Because Chrysler would not have gotten you a deferment or anything.
No.
Yeah. All right. So you get drafted in '66, and now at that point when you got drafted, how much did you know about what was going on in Vietnam?
Not a whole lot. Like most people, it was something that showed on TV occasionally. I knew we were fighting over there, but that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's see. Had you done a draft physical already by that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because once I turned 18, we went through all of that, and because my family was always military, my father, my uncles on both sides. I had 8 uncles on my father's side, 4 on my mother's side. All of them served in the military. So it was no question what I was going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
You knew you were going in there.
Yeah.
And so then once you now get the draft notice, how do they process you, or what happens now?
Well, from there, we had to meet at Fort Wayne. We took the train to Fort Knox, for basic training, and that whole period started.
Okay. What kind of reception do you get at Fort Knox?
It wasn't bad. I mean, drill sergeants are drill sergeants, Immediately they let you know they're in charge and they're going to train you to become a fighting man, so that was about it.
How much had your relatives told you about how this worked or what was going to happen?
Oh, I knew quite a bit.
Okay.
Because all my uncles, like I say, were in. Didn't get a lot of information from my dad because he wasn't around, but my uncles gave me a lot of information.
Okay.
A lot of information.
So you had a little better idea of what was going to happen to you,
Yeah.
maybe, than some guys.
Yeah.
All right. And then did they spend a number of days processing and doing tests and stuff?
There was a few days testing, because they want to know what your aptitude is. From there, of course, we got, before we finished basic, me wanting to be airborne, volunteered for that. So there was no question about where you were going.
Right. Okay.
That was automatic infantry. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about just what actually happens in basic training.
Well, basic, you go through, your calisthenics every morning. You go through the training for rifle, training for a little bit, at that time they did for jungle training because they knew you were going to Vietnam. All the basic hand-to-hand stuff. What else? A lot of marching, a lot of uphill. There was a hill at Fort Knox called Suicide Hill that everybody dreaded because you had full packs on and you hiked that thing I don't know how many times, you know, that kind of stuff.
And then how much emphasis was there on discipline?
Oh, a lot. I remember one time we were in formation because once you're at attention, you can't move, you can't do anything. And I got stung by a bee in the back of my ear, and I did not move. So, you know, I mean, they stressed it. And we had pretty good drill sergeant. Him and his assistant was probably one of the two better drill sergeants at that time, because we saw some that were kind of like, ugh, I don't want to go with that guy. But these guys taught you a lot, especially with discipline. And they weren't, I would say, they weren't overbearing with it. You know, they made sure that you understood that this is discipline and this will save your life. Yeah.
Okay. So they weren't doing too many things just to mess with you.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we're fortunate that way.
Okay. Now, what would happen? I mean, I guess for you, it was probably relatively easy to adjust to this, or you?
Yeah, because I was an athlete all my life.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, the calisthenics, the walking, the hiking, it was nothing.
Yeah,
You know?
and you understood the military a little bit better just
Right.
with the family background.
Right.
What about the guys around you? How did they adjust?
Some had a hard time. Matter of fact, there was another guy that went to Pershing with us, and he, I think it's somewhere around the 4th or 5th week of basic, because at night, you know, you get a chance to sit around and talk, whatever. And most of us, especially from Detroit, we're into Motown. So we'd always played Motown music, Temptations, Supremes, Miracles. And with us, especially me and this guy, we like to dance. So we would do the Temptations routines and stuff, and you know, and they, of course, everybody called us Motown. Well, this guy decided he was going to get out. So what he did, he swallowed some aluminum foil and complained about his stomach, and he got out.
Okay.
So that was just one guy. You know, another guy had some bad feet, flat feet or whatever. He made it through, but it was difficult. You know.
Now you had gone in with some friends, right?
Oh yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, we just, for whatever reason, we all got drafted at the same time.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we all went to junior high school together, and we all went in the same day. So.
All right. So you were just there together, but then, and pretty much anybody out of Detroit normally got sent to Fort Knox to train,
Right.
unless it was full,
Yes.
and then they sent you someplace
Right.
else.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were just kind of there together to a certain extent by accident, but
Right.
it meant that you had some guys you knew there with you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which helps. All right. And then in the process of this, you decided that you wanted to go to jump school.
Right.
And then, did the other guys go with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how long did basic last?
Basic, I think at that time was like 8 weeks.
Okay. And then what's going to be your next stop now?
Well, our next stop was AIT, which was kind of jungle training.
Right.
Instead of going to Fort Polk, Louisiana, they sent us to Fort Gordon, Georgia, because they knew we were going to jump school, which put us closer to Fort Benning.
Right.
So we went to AIT, did that bit, which was, like I say, mostly jungle training. And from there, we went to Fort Benning for jump school.
Describe the AIT a little bit more specifically. What
AIT was more focused on infantry. You know, what you would have to do in the situations if you're caught behind enemy lines, how to get back to base camp, stuff like that. A little bit more training on your weapon. By that time, they had given us an M16, so we got to train on that. There was an overnight maneuver where we had to find our way back to, like we were in the middle of the jungle or whatever, and find your way back to base camp. That's it, which really helped me. So
So, okay, we were talking about the AIT. You had the jungle training. You had the escape
Right.
and evasion part, and so
Right.
forth. And did you kind of get the full range of infantry weapons as part of that
Oh
training?
yeah, oh yeah. We got the M79 law. We got the grenades. We got the. It was an over and under that not many people had, but they let us use it. We got the M60 machine gun.
And the over and under, was that a version of a grenade launcher? Or?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we also got a chance to shoot 50 caliber, 45. I think that was it, because if you went any further than that, then you're getting into mortars and stuff like that. So.
Okay. Did they make any effort to simulate conditions in Vietnam?
They did. They did, which was kind of hard. You know, in Georgia, how do you simulate a jungle? But they tried as best they could. Yeah, because there was a village set up, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, did they have anybody training you at this point who had been to Vietnam?
Yes. Oh yeah. We had a couple of sergeants that had already been there. Yeah, which was helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what kinds of things would they tell you?
Well, basically, you know, stay away from the being wet all the time. You know, wash your feet every day. You know, powder if you can. That kind of stuff. Stay away from the villages. Of course, they tell you stay away from the women.
Right.
You know, I think that was kind of a rote thing everybody told you. You know, but other than that, that was basically it. You know, keep your head down, stuff like that. You know, watch out for booby traps. That was another part of what they did. They tried to simulate the booby traps, which, yeah, they were close, but no cigar.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, while you were at AIT, did you get any chance to go off the base, or do you just stay?
Oh
on
yeah,
the
we went to Fort Gordon was close to Augusta, so we went to. I think we went twice on the weekend to Augusta. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you're a black guy from Detroit.
Yeah.
And you're going out now into Georgia and go off the base. Did you notice the world being different down there?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It was a big difference, you know, because you know, well, for me, I had seen it before because my family's from Georgia, from Macon.
Okay.
But we were still treated as if, you know, you're a boy. You don't need to be here and stuff like that. You know, certain hotels we couldn't go to. You know, we found one hotel. It's funny because the four of us stayed in this hotel one night, and this was the second trip to Augusta. And of course, when you go, you're going to drink. You know, so we all got pretty smashed, and woke up the next morning, and we had been robbed.
Oh.
And the only way you could get in is through the transit above the door. And of course, the hotel, they don't know anything about this, you know. So we called the police, and you know, we had vowed to go back and take revenge, but of course that never happened. Because the first time we went, we stayed at a hotel downtown, one of the nice hotels, no problem. But this other place, oh my God.
All right.
Yeah. And you know, when you call the police down there, it's like, okay, which one of you guys ripped off everybody else and all that kind of, I'm like, forget it, we'll leave.
Right.
You know. So yeah, we got treated pretty bad. And then ironically, on the way back home on the bus back to the base, one of the guys, we didn't know him, but he got into a fight with a bunch of white guys. And of course, you know, we stand up, and the rest of them, they look at us like, what are you going to do? You know, like, well, it's like six of you guys picking on this one guy, man, you know. So, but it quickly got dispersed, so, yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So now you had gone, but you'd gone down to Macon, Georgia.
Oh, yeah,
earlier.
a few times, yeah, because my family's from there, yeah.
So, yeah. All right. But maybe for some of your friends, it was kind of an
Oh, it
eye-opening
was
experience.
very eye-opening for them, yeah.
Okay. And do you get to the point of wondering, you know, why are we going to be in the Army for this country?
Yeah, that came up quite a bit, especially after we got to Vietnam. You know, because it became since I was a radio operator for a lot of the time, and being a radio operator, if you had OPs or ambush patrols at night, you had to have a radio operator with you. So consequently, I was out almost every night. And I'm like, there's other radio operators,
Yeah.
you know.
That sort of thing. All right.
So-
Let's get a little bit ahead of the story here. So, okay.
Yeah.
You do AIT. Is that another 8 weeks or?
AIT was not 8 weeks. It was, oh, geez, I can't remember how long it was. I think it was just a little bit shorter, maybe 6.
Okay.
I can't remember.
All right. Okay. And then is jump school next? Or?
Jump school is next. We go to Fort Benning.
Okay. Now, what was that like?
That was phenomenal. First of all, you ran 5 miles every morning before breakfast, then calisthenics. Excuse me. Then you did breakfast. Then we did our training, which prepared you to get ready to jump out of airplanes, you know, showing you how to fall, showing, you know, once you get up in the towers and they let you down. And all. They basically want to know, are you afraid of heights?
Mm-hmm.
And can you get past it? Okay. Then the physical part of it, it's all designed to make you more fit, stronger. Because when you hit the ground, sometimes it, you know, if you forget how to fall, you need to have some strength about you. You know. So we ran 5 miles in the morning, 5 miles at night.
Of course, the part building up stamina doesn't necessarily help you when you hit the ground, but
No.
it's the idea that you might be landing someplace
Right.
far away from anything,
Right.
and you're going to do a lot of walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, it was also calisthenics was just crazy. I mean, just I was never in better shape in my life than at that time.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, what portion of the people who start a class finish it?
Back then, I think we only had out of our class, we only had 3 guys that didn't finish. And one of those guys was because he broke his leg, I think, on the second jump. So, yeah.
All right. And how do they work you up toward jumping?
Well, like I say, they start you out showing you how to fall and roll, because you have to roll when you fall. They start you on these, almost like a step stool, and they have you jump off of that. And you have to show them that you know how to roll, because there's a technique. And from there, then you go up a little bit higher, and they simulate you coming down in a chute. You know, they take you up, and the chute is already deployed, and then they drop it, and you have to come down and fall, right? All of this is done in the first 3 weeks. You know, every day you're getting more and more training on floating and how to fall. And the 4th week, you actually go out and you have to make 3 complete jumps before you get your jump wings.
All right. So what was that first jump like?
First jump was phenomenal. And I think there's a misconception, because most people think you're going to be afraid on the first jump. No. It's the jumps after the first jump when you figure out in your head what could happen. The first jump, you're excited. You want to do this, you know. And after that, it's like, oh my God, what did I do? Yeah.
All right. But you got through those.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And now at this point, once you finish jump school, is it going to be home in Vietnam, or do you get other training?
Well, what happened was we were supposed to go home and go to Vietnam, but what happened was we went to Fort Campbell with the 101st. I was only there 2 weeks, but from there we went home and then went to Nam, which made us miss the combat jump in Vietnam. We were 2 weeks late.
Yeah, because the unit that you would join, the 173rd, that was the one unit that actually made a combat jump in Vietnam.
Yeah, and we just missed it.
All right.
Yeah.
So you get home for 2 weeks, and what was it like going home after the training? Did things seem at all different, or?
Not at first, because I think because of my family and the neighborhood I grew up in, and also the place that I worked at TRW, which had a big veteran contingency, and their nickname was the Old Guard. So I actually went out there while I was home wearing my uniform, and I was, accepted pretty much. My family, of course, accepted me.
Right.
So that was not a problem at all, and we were pretty proud, because now I'm wearing jump boots, I've got the wings on, the whole nine, and you're pretty proud about that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then how do they get you out to Vietnam?
Flew.
Okay.
We went to Fort Dix, and then, of course, went to the airport, and we flew from Fort Dix to California, San Francisco. From San Francisco to Hawaii, and I believe we stopped in Okinawa briefly, and then we went to Vietnam.
Okay. And where did you land in Vietnam?
At Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you come in during the day or at night?
During the day.
Okay.
Actually, it was in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your first impression of Vietnam?
Hot. And, you were thinking, okay, what are we going to land into, and it was actually pretty peaceful, around Tan Son Nhut. So we were like, okay, where's the action? What's going on here,
What do they do with you once you get off the plane?
Well, you go through a little orientation. They kind of brief you and, tell you stuff not to do, of course, and here comes the talk about the women again, Then they assigned you to a unit, which at that point, we knew we were being assigned to 173rd. Myself and a guy named Ed Williams got assigned to 2nd Bat A Company. So he and I went to 2nd Bat. Cornell went to the 1st Bat, and Thomas went to the 4th Bat.
All right.
So we all got separated except for me and Eddie.
Right.
So,
You're in the same brigade, but now split up into different units. You'll not see a whole lot of each other.
Never see each other.
That point. Yeah.
Never see each other again.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, where was the 173rd operating at that time?
At that time, we were at Benoit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so, what was the experience like to join the unit? What kind of reception do you get?
Well, initially, because they were out on operation, there was nobody back in base camp except for the XO clerks, supply sergeants, stuff like that. So I got assigned to a hooch. First off, Eddie got assigned to a different hooch, and the first night I'm in the hooch by myself, because everybody else is gone. And it was funny because, it's pitch black. There's no lights, So I find my way to a bunk. You got the mosquito net up, and I get in the bunk, and of course I'm not going to sleep, And halfway through the night, I felt something trying to get on the bunk. And I'm like, oh, what is this? And I'm just kind of laying there, and I'm starting to sweat, and I'm wondering, what is this? Is this some kind of animal that I don't know about? And this went on for probably about a half an hour. And finally, I hit it. I said, enough of this. I swung at it. It's a puppy, because it yelped. The guys that had that bunk had already left country, and that was his puppy.
Oh.
Trying to get in the bed, which was a big relief.
Yeah. It wasn't a rat anyway. So.
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, did they send you out to join the unit in the field, or did they just come back?
They came back a couple days later. Okay, then that's when I met everybody. I was in the 1st platoon, and started getting acclimated. It wasn't long that I went on my first operation, though.
All right. Now, how did the other guys treat the new people, or were you just the new guy at that point?
Well, you just what they call an FNG. I was just the new guy. Because nobody knew me. But it didn't take long. Once you tell people where you're from and how you grew up, and you become friends real quick.
All right. So were there? What was there to the ethnic mix of the platoon?
The platoon was probably, I want to say, 60% black,
Okay.
20% Hispanic, and the rest white.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can have you're not just by yourself in,
Right.
in this particular
Yeah.
case. Okay.
Yeah.
And what happens when you go out on your first operation, or what's it like to go in the field for the first time?
Well, we went out, took choppers first, and we rode a lot of choppers. Before we even landed, we get in sniper fire. So I'm thinking, okay, now you got to do what you were trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we get close to the ground, and the pilot says, jump. I'm like, is he supposed to land? He says, jump. I was like, oh, God. So here we jumping out of this helicopter, I don't know how many feet off the ground, because all you can see is this tall banana grass.
Mm-hmm.
We had to be like 10, 12 feet off the ground. So we jump, hit the ground, and we hit the ground running. So you're running towards where the sniper fire is coming from. You know, guys are just laying down every few feet, fire,
Mm-hmm.
go towards the sniper fire some more. And we did that probably about half an hour,
Okay.
and it was over.
And did you recognize what they were doing from training?
Oh,
or-
yeah. Oh, yeah. I knew immediately. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And then basically, did the snipers just disappear at some point, or?
Well, they got one of them.
Mm-hmm.
They said there was 3. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm new. I don't know
Mhm.
what to look for, you know.
Yeah.
But they got one of them, and I guess the other 2 kind of took off or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. And now what happens?
Well, now we start walking. So you walk. We probably walked for a better part of the day until we, came to the spot where the command said, "Okay, this is where we're gonna bed down for the night." So you dig your foxholes, 2 or 3 guys to a foxhole, and you sit down and cook yourself something to eat. Out of your sea rations, kind of like BS a while, and
Mm-hmm.
one guy takes over first watch at that foxhole, and you take turns all night, a couple hours, and then that's it.
Now, was this the whole company together at this point?
This was the whole company.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you would move, and were you in jungle or mixed terrain, or what was it like?
It was
there?
mixed. It was mixed because there were some spots you could probably consider an LZ.
Mm-hmm.
There were some spots that were jungle, and I think the first place that we went was real close to Swan Lock, which was a lot of rice paddies.
Mm-hmm.
So we encountered a lot of rice paddies after the initial going through a patch of jungle.
Right.
So,
And then would you move on trails or off trails?
oh no, you never walked on a trail. No, you made your own trails.
Mm-hmm.
No, if you came across a trail, you had the point man who tested the trail even before we crossed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we crossed, in an area probably about 10 yards wide. You didn't go past that because you didn't know what you're going to run into,
Mm-hmm.
and then we moved on.
Okay.
One thing about the 173rd is that they were very well trained in how to operate in the jungle.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had guys who knew what they were doing
Oh,
and
yeah.
were consistent about it, and making
yeah.
sure the rest of you do it too.
The one friend that I'm glad that I met, he was a Native American Indian. And for whatever reason, he took me under his wing, and he taught me everything he knew.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I could not do that he did, he could smell them.
Mm-hmm.
How? I don't know. But he could smell. He could tell. He said if Viet Cong were around, he knew instantly.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say you could smell people sometimes just by the nature of what their diet was,
Right.
or when they
exactly.
were going to send.
And that's how they detected us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So did anything else happen on that patrol, or was it quiet?
That was pretty quiet. I think we ran into one other sniper, but it was just one guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he quickly disappeared.
Okay.
So,
Now, basically, when is it that you start patrolling? Is this March of '67? Was that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're there, and then how long do you stay around Benoit?
well, we stayed at Benoit until it had to be May. Yeah, because in May, I went on my first R&R to Taipei, and we were already at Pleiku.
Okay.
So we were at Pleiku, and then maybe 2 or 3 days, Sergeant came along, you want to go on R&R? Sure. So I went on R&R and came back. We're still at Pleiku. We were at Pleiku probably, I want to say maybe 3 weeks or more.
Okay.
And that was the monsoon.
All right.
So it was raining every day, all day long.
Okay. Let's back up to the sort of the first couple of months when you were operating out of
Yeah.
Benoit. Did you have much enemy contact during that time?
We had contact, yeah.
Okay.
It was light, but we did have contact. Never ran into any North Vietnamese regulars. It was always, Viet Cong. And we run into them, sniper fire. It might be a small, I think one time there was a small kind of like maybe, not even platoon, squad maybe, that kind of thing. We captured one guy, I remember, because I remember them calling in a chopper to take him out to be interrogated. Yeah.
Okay. And so was your unit taking many casualties at that point?
No, not many at all.
All right. And were you doing just sort of patrols that would last a day or two, or were you out longer?
No, patrols lasted at least 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
At least, yeah.
Right.
And once we did that, we go back to base camp for a few days. And of course, we'd all get together and go to Benoit. There was a bar in Benoit called the TV bar that the 173rd kind of controlled. So.
All right. Now, when you're out on these patrols, were there a lot of civilians in those areas?
No.
Okay.
The only time we saw civilians, we ran into some mountain yards.
But that would have been later on.
That
right?
was later on. Yeah.
Okay.
For whatever reason, our unit never ran into a lot of civilians. Most of the time, we ran into Viet Cong.
Okay. So you're not in areas that have a lot of villages?
No.
Or if there were a village, you didn't go through it?
No, we didn't go through them.
Okay. And you didn't see people out there tending their fields or things like that?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it was just you and the Viet Cong and nature at that point?
Most of our stuff was just walking through the jungle. Yeah.
All right. Now, how do you wind up going to Pleiku, or what happens then when you move?
Well, General Westmoreland considered us his pets. So wherever he felt like he wanted to concentrate some effort, we got picked.
Okay.
So for whatever reason, we got sent to Pleiku. We had a convoy from Benoit to Pleiku. And got to Pleiku, and I can remember it raining. And that was the first time I heard Hanoi Hannah on the radio. And we were going into the Andrine Valley, okay? And she came on the radio that night and told us that's where we were going.
Okay.
And that they were waiting for us. I remember that. I'm like, what? Crazy. Yeah.
All right. And then how long did you spend then in Pleiku, you think?
It wasn't long. It wasn't more than 2 or 3 weeks at most.
And was there a base there at that point that you were
Small
operating on?
base, yeah. A very small base, yeah.
So there was not a divisional base there yet?
No.
Because it would be later, but not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then when you move out, what do you do?
We move out. It was the same thing. We went on patrols, small patrols. We ran into one particular firefight, I remember at Pleiku, where a couple of guys got hit. And that was the first time that I saw actually an American get wounded, And I kept thinking to myself, we got to keep this up. We got to protect our guys, because most of the time it was the point man or the man behind the point man, So all I remember is saying to myself, how do we keep these guys from getting hit like that? And you can't, because we were under orders. You don't fire first, which we thought was crazy, So you had to wait for them to shoot at you before you could shoot back.
Okay. So they sometimes talk about free fire zones and so forth. And if you're in a place that has that designation, do you get to shoot first? Or did that not affect you?
We didn't pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Put it blankly.
Okay.
We didn't. If we saw somebody, we fired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
All right. Now, how quickly did you start to get into more serious fighting up there once you're up in that area?
Well, we didn't get into serious fighting until we got to Docto.
Okay. And when was that?
That was early June,
Okay.
and we started getting into serious fighting.
So you've got a couple of weeks at least, or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're doing that.
But
And
every time we went out, we ran into more and more strength fire, so to speak. We noticed that, this was getting a little bit more concentrated.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And could you see signs of enemy presence, footprints,
yeah.
or things like that?
Well, footprints, we ran into base camps, tunnel systems that we had never seen before,
mm-hmm.
stuff like that, yeah.
Okay. At this point, are you the companies operating just as companies, or do they break up into platoons, or what are you doing?
We're pretty much operating as a company.
Okay. And about how many men were in the company at that point?
Well, officially there was 141
mm-hmm.
in our company. But of course you got some people back at base camp, you got some people on R&R, you got some people, getting ready to deload back home.
Mm-hmm.
So really out in the field you may have 130, 125. So, yeah.
All right. And so there's a period of time there where things are getting a little more ominous, or you have a sense that something is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And then, well, I guess that kind of gets us up here to Docto.
Yeah.
Now, do you move? I mean, Docto is just a small place in the jungle, right? There was
Yeah.
some kind of base
Central
there.
Highlands.
Yeah.
We had a base camp, which they also had an airfield.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being air mobile,
Mm-hmm.
we took a lot of chopper flights.
Right.
So we would leave the base camp at Docto, fly out a certain area, choppers would drop us, and then we patrol for a while,
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we started noticing all the, a little bit more concentrated stuff, And I think it was like the third time we went out, which was the Battle of the Slopes,
mm-hmm.
22nd of June. On the 20th, I think we went out. The 21st, we ran into a tunnel system, a base
mm-hmm.
camp. Of course, the smaller guys went in the tunnels and all that, And that night, company commander decided, okay, we're gonna bed down here until in the morning, and then we'll take off. But in the morning, I want the 1st platoon to drop CS crystals in this tunnel, which was my platoon.
Mm-hmm.
So we got up the next morning, and the rest of the company took off down the hill. We dropped the crystals, and as soon as we dropped the crystals and got our rucksacks and stuff and ready to go, we heard all this firing. I mean, it sounded like all hell had broke loose.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're talking on the radio with them. They're bedded down at the bottom of the hill in this valley, and here we come, the rear end. By the time we got there, probably, I'd say a quarter of them had been hit or killed, and that's when it all started.
All right.
I mean,
so they didn't try to make you maneuver or try to flank the enemy or anything like that?
You couldn't.
You were just coming in?
You couldn't. The jungle was so thick.
Mm-hmm.
We only saw them in flashes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time you were firing at what was firing at you.
Right.
And by the time we got down down into the valley,
mm-hmm.
the rest of the guys were already spread out, and they were on their bellies. There was no flanking. There was, because you could tell by how much fire was coming out. It's more than the company.
Right.
You know, it's more than whatever. We didn't find out later till it was we found it was a battalion, but it was just crazy. That was the heaviest fire we had ever gotten. So we knew we were in for a battle.
All right. And basically, were you just stuck and pinned down there?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we were stuck. Where you first landed, you were stuck.
Okay. And then did the enemy make efforts to come in
Oh, yeah.
at you?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
They made waves several times. Several times. I was a radio operator, so I was with the Lieutenant Sexton, and the medic was close by. The other guys were kind of spread to the right and the left. I don't know how long a time it was, but the next thing I knew, I was the only one that was not hit or not dead. My radio had been shot up, so I couldn't even communicate. The last thing I heard on the radio, I heard Captain Milton say, "Come back up the hill." Well, Lieutenant was hit, the medic was hit, everybody. I'm tending to people with wounds and firing at the same time. So I'm like, what the hell can I do? So I just kept doing what I was doing. Before I knew it, all the firing had stopped. They brought in the choppers, they brought in the jets, which was just, I don't know, not far from me. I saw my buddy Eddie from high school get it right across the chest, and he fell, but he was up on his knees. And I'm like, Eddie, get down. And it just, he was gone. After that, it was a long silence. And I remember Lieutenant told me, well, you got to go get help. And I'm like, I can't leave you. You know, there's nobody else here. He said, soldier, this is an order. So I started up the path. I got to the main path going up the hill, and I could see the supply sergeant sitting in the middle of the path with a, M60. And he's waving me on, and I'm telling him, I got people down here. So I go, I felt long as I let somebody know that people were still here, at least they would know. So I went back to the lieutenant, the rest of the guys, put a bandage around his head. The medic, his guts were hanging out, so I pushed his guts back in and wrapped him up. And then I ain't hear nothing for a long time. And it was starting to get dark. I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on, Figured everybody was gone by then, and they were. So I went down the path, crawling, and I see these 3 Vietnamese soldiers. So we fired each other, and evidently they were low on ammo just like I was. We extinguished our ammo. I hit one of them. The other 2 rushed me, and I wound up killing one of them with a knife and the other one with my bare hands.
Wow.
By that time, it was really getting dark, and I'm like, okay, what do you do? So I sat there for a while thinking, okay, I know which way Docto is, so I'll head that way. And I started walking, and if I heard anything, I stopped and waited for like half hour before I moved again. I did this for 3 days.
Okay. Did you have any food on you, or?
I had 1 meal. That was it. I wound up eating grubs, some vegetation. I had very little water. I didn't have much water either. Once that was done, after like a day and a half, I just kind of made do. My sergeant thought, because when I got back to Docto, he was the first one I saw, Sergeant Sanchez. He said, Billingsley, where you been? I'm like, Sarge, I'm just getting back. He said, I put you in for mission in action. I'm like, well, I was for 3 days.
Now, over the course of that time, did you ever actually see any Vietnamese, or just?
Yeah, I saw a couple times,
Okay.
but I just laid there and was still and quiet,
Mm-hmm.
you know, until they went past. Yeah.
All right. But you walk, okay, and then, so you just walk up to the base perimeter?
No, no. When I got close enough to see the perimeter, what I did, I took my helmet and I separated my steel pot from the helmet liner,
Mm-hmm.
and I stuck my steel pot up in the air, and I started yelling at the guy who was on duty,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know a password,
Yeah.
you know, and he recognized me,
Okay.
and he said, come on in, you know, 'cause I knew you don't just walk up there like that, because they got claymores out, they
Yeah.
you know, they got booby traps. I'm like, no way.
Mm-hmm.
So he helped me walk through all of that.
Okay. And then once you got back in, did you find out what happened to the people you left behind?
Yeah, yeah. Sexton, Lieutenant Sexton died. The medic died. There was only one guy. What was his name? He was kind of a new guy. He was the only one that made it,
Mm-hmm.
because they went down the next morning and got everybody out.
Mm-hmm. Now, had they just died of their wounds, or the Vietnamese? But the Vietnamese hadn't come in. To finish them off?
Most of them died of it. A couple of them were, you know, because there's no way of telling whether they died that day or they died during the night when they could. But they did say that they came in that night and they heard fire,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I heard fire that night.
Yeah.
So I knew that some of them were being killed,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
So if you had stayed where you were, you might have been in trouble.
Yeah, I would have been in trouble, definitely.
All right. Okay, so now you've gone back, you rejoined the unit, and you managed. Had you been hit yourself in this, or were you
No.
still, at this point, you haven't been hit?
I had not been hit.
Okay.
No.
Now, do they have to rebuild the platoon, or what happens?
Yeah,
now?
they had to get reinforcements in. Matter of fact, the day I got back was the day that they had the 76 bodies laid out, and they were identifying them.
Yeah.
You know, so of course, me being one of the older people in the unit, I got put over there with those guys. But they had identified about half of them by then.
Yeah.
But I got to Eddie's body bag, and I zipped it open, and I'm like, I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I totally lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they told me, said, okay, Billingslea, you can be dismissed, you know. And General Westmoreland showed up on the 29th. We went out, the night of the 28th, we went out because we had gotten quite a few recruits.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to acclimate them to, you know, what it's like to be out at night. So we went up in the hill, and that night, what happened was I hadn't had much sleep in like 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody's got to do guard duty on their own foxhole. I fell asleep. And I woke up to the first sergeant asking who this is. So I told him who I was, and he said, well, you come see me in the morning, because we're going back to Docto in the morning. And my birthday, first thing he did, he handed me a entrenching tool. And he says, okay, I want you to mark an 8 foot by 8 foot hole, and I want you to go 8 feet down. And you will dig all day and tomorrow until you get it done.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So I start digging this hole. Lunchtime comes and Westmoreland shows up. So now I got to go back, clean up, get dressed, stand in formation. Standing in formation, and his assistant, it was a colonel, called my name. I'm like, oh man, what have I done? You know. So I walk up, you know, saluting General Westmoreland, and I'm shaking like a leaf. And he says, soldier, I got something for you. And he pins the Bronze Star on me.
Mm-hmm.
had no idea Sergeant Sanchez had put me in for this thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I'm like, what a sigh of relief, you know.
After that, did you have to go back to the hole?
Yes. I dug that hole until dusk. First sergeant was satisfied, and he said, okay, now fill it back in.
Mm-hmm.
But I was 20 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how many men were left in your platoon who had been there before that fight?
18.
Okay. So was some part of the platoon not there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was probably about 10 to 15 guys that weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
There were some guys on R&R. There was some guys that, for whatever reason, were in sick bay. Some guys that were in like company headquarters,
Right.
you know, that sort of thing.
But of the guys who had actually been out there in the field, that was you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Did they move anyone in from other platoons to help give you some more experienced guys, or did they just add new guys?
We had a couple sergeants from other companies, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then most of our guys came from the States.
Mm-hmm.
There were some sergeants. Matter of fact, Sergeant Webb, who was our trainer at jump school, came to our platoon. Okay, and then some other guys, and another guy that I went to school with came. He was a medic.
Mm-hmm.
He showed up in our company.
All right. And then you would have gotten a new lieutenant, or did you just have
Oh
a
yeah,
second?
we got all new lieutenants. Yeah, and most of these guys were out of West Point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
It can be good, but most of them is bad because they don't have any experience, and if they're really gung-ho and ambitious, they want to make a name for themselves at the expense of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of listening to a first sergeant or staff sergeant or something to learn.
Mm-hmm.
We had one guy like that, and I'm glad he was not my platoon leader. Because he was, the guys that he was commanding, I mean, nobody liked him.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Now, at this stage in the war or in that unit, was there any prospect of fragging or doing anything to kind of get rid of an officer you didn't like?
Oh yeah, yeah. A couple people wanted to get rid of the XO.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what was wrong with the XO?
Well, he was obviously prejudiced, for
Okay.
one. One of the reasons Eddie was in the field, and he'd only been in the field 3 days when he got killed,
Mm-hmm.
because of the XO. When we got to Vietnam, Eddie, because he could type, got chosen to be a company clerk.
Right.
Because nobody else knew how to type.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie was the only one of us four that was married. Okay, so I was happy for him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he got sent out to the field because the XO found a white guy that could do the job,
Mm-hmm.
and he got killed 3 days later. So,
Yep.
that, you know, among other reasons, not a lot of people like the XO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are good officers and there are
Yeah.
not so good officers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, now Docto winds up being a kind of extended campaign and a whole series
Yeah.
of firefights
Yeah.
and battles. So, do you get back into that again now?
Well, we're still there.
Yeah.
So what happens is after we get the recruits, now mind you, this is like the end of June now, and we go back out on July 9th. July 9th, we get in the choppers, we go back up to the hill, we land. As soon as we land, we're getting sniper fire. So we're charging toward the snipers, and Captain Milton decided, okay, enough of this. He learned from the 22nd of June, you know, let's call in some artillery to get rid of this guy. I don't want to lose any more men. Calls in artillery, and I didn't find this out until last year. Okay, I always thought all these years it was mortar, but no. What got me that day, and him, and 9 other people, was a short round.
Oh.
Yeah. Myself, the company commander, his command post, and 2 guys in my foxhole all got it because of a short round.
All right. And then how badly were you hurt?
I was hurt pretty bad. This arm was almost blown off. That's what brought me home.
Okay. Now, but you'd been hit twice before that, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's
Those were little like flesh wounds. I got hit right here on this arm,
Mm-hmm.
and I got hit on the knee.
And when had those happened?
Well, the first one, like I say, was in April.
Okay.
The second one was in June.
Okay. So the first one was when you were still back in the Benoit area.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you got hit, like, I mean, did you lose any time in the field, or they just
No.
took a Band-Aid on you and you go back out again?
I went to sick call,
Mm-hmm.
probably about half an hour, went back.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This one was a little bit more because it was my knee,
Mm-hmm.
because it affected my walking. So I stayed in sick bay about a day, and then went back.
Okay. Those sort of minor interruptions.
Right,
Did
yeah.
you have problems with those wounds getting infected or anything like that? Or okay.
No.
So they took care of you properly.
Yeah.
All right. But now this time you're seriously hit. So once you're hit, now what happens to you?
Well, first thing happens is sergeant came over, gave me a shot of morphine, wrapped my arm, because I didn't know what it was like. I couldn't feel anything. So he wrapped my arm around me and wrapped a bandage around.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing I knew, I was on the chopper, getting choppered out. Went to I'm not even sure where I went, but I went to a mass unit.
Yep.
And next thing I knew, I woke up probably 2 days later, okay? And I was still wrapped up, but this time in, kind of clean linen kind of stuff, And they told me, write a letter home, let, your family know that you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. Then they took me from there. We went to the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
The Philippines, they obviously did another minor surgery,
Mm-hmm.
which they, from what I understand, what they did, they cut as much dead flesh as they could. Because I woke up and I remember being in the gurney, nurses walking around, they would give me food to eat. And a couple of days later, I wake up in the middle of the night and there's something crawling on me. And I reach back with my right hand underneath the bandage. It was a maggot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the hell? I'm pushing the nurse's bed. She said, oh, they put that in to eat all the dead flesh
Yeah.
that they can't cut away. I'm like, oh, jeez. So after that, we go to Japan. I'm in Japan for about a month. That's where they did another surgery, and they wanted to take my arm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, Captain, you're not taking my arm. So I argued with him for 2 days. And finally, his commanding officer showed up. He was a colonel.
Mm-hmm.
He did the surgery.
Okay.
And the colonel said, you may not be able to use it, but I'm going to save it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And you still have the arm and you're using it.
yeah,
So the colonel was right.
yeah.
Okay. Now at this point, you're badly enough hurt. Obviously you go home to the States, right?
Yeah.
How did they get you back?
They flew me, medevac from Japan to Alaska, and Alaska to Andrews Air Force Base. From Andrews, they bused me to Valley Forge.
Mm-hmm.
And get to Valley Forge, and I'm at Valley Forge, and I start rehab and all this stuff, and I was there for 9 months.
All right. So what is that experience like? I mean, you were ambulatory.
Right.
You could get around and do things.
Yeah.
So how did you spend your time there?
Most of the time, well, once I got to where I could get up and move around pretty
Mm-hmm.
good, I started going to the gym almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple of guys, ball players from Detroit. I didn't know them, but, we started playing basketball in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I spent a lot. Could only use one arm, but
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time in that gym, just shooting. The other times on the weekend, I'd go to Philadelphia or I go to New York, just for the weekend, just to get away and come back.
Did you have any family come visit you while you were there?
No.
Okay.
No. I got to come home the first time, I think I had been there about a month. And the doctor said, okay, you're good enough to go home. So I came home the first time. And I went to Philadelphia Airport, never forget, total uniform, ran into some protesters. One of those guys spit on me. Now, mind you, I got my arm, it's in a cast because I got nerve damage. I got these things hanging, from, and I tried to kill that guy with one hand. The airport police pulled me off of him, and the only reason they didn't arrest me is because I had witnesses that said that this guy started it. But I never wore my uniform home again.
Yeah.
Ever.
All right. And then what kind of reception did you get when you got home?
When I got home, it was pretty good. Like I said, my family has always been, not a problem.
And were they more relieved that you were mostly okay?
Oh, yeah. My mom, 'cause I wasn't married at the time. My mom was thoroughly happy, The only bad thing about it, as soon as I came home, they sent my brother. So now he was over there. But my family was elated. My uncles were like, oh, man, we got a hero in the family.
Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't want to hear anything military. I didn't want to see anything military. I just wanted to get out.
Right.
Okay.
Now, you spent like about 9 months at Valley Forge Hospital. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the time, and then once you get out of there, what did they do with you?
They sent me back to Fort Knox.
Okay.
The doctor could have let me out, but he said, well, you can spend the rest of your time at Fort Knox. I'm like, Doc, what am I going to do? I had a profile that said I couldn't handle a weapon. I couldn't lift over 10 pounds. What do you want me to do while I'm at Fort Knox? He said, well, you're going anyway.
Okay.
Whatever. So I get to Fort Knox, and this was like less than a week after Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Oh.
Okay. And it's like, okay, now we got this to deal with. So you got troops leaving Fort Knox, going to these cities where these riots are going on. I can't even go, So I spent most of my time in the day room. I had bought a reel-to-reel recorder when I was in Taipei. They sent that to me. So what I did, I started recording music, and I would play it in the day room all day for the guys. Okay.
So you were the improvised DJ.
Yeah. And that's all I could do.
All right. Now, among the personnel at Fort Knox, after the King assassination, what kinds of responses or whatever could you observe? Or
it was kind of mixed because, of course, the blacks, we didn't want to go to these cities. Even some of the white guys were like, man, I'm not going down there and get mixed into that, But you're in the military and you're under orders. So if you get orders to go, you have to go, So a lot of guys did it, but they did it reluctantly. Fortunate for me, I didn't have to.
Right.
I was just basically kind of guy just sitting around waiting for my time to go by.
Yeah. And of course, Detroit had its big riots the year before.
Right.
Yeah. And they'd send people, the 101st Airborne had gone up there. So
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So now at this point, and it's been because of your injury and so forth, I'm assuming the Army is not encouraging you to stay?
No.
Okay.
Matter of fact, they're encouraging me to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when do you get out?
I get out August of '68.
Okay. And what do you do once you're out?
I come home. The girl that I had met earlier that year, that her sister married my best friend who was back home. And fortunately, I was home for their wedding, so I was his best man. That was in January of '68.
Mm-hmm.
I got a chance to come home
Yeah.
on leave for that. We were planning on getting married. She had pretty much made all the plans.
Mm-hmm.
Got the hall, got everything set. So once I got home, we got married the next month, September.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to work at TRW, which I had already been there, which you add in my 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
almost 2.5 years. So I had my seniority.
Right.
So I went back to work. You know, we started our life together.
Okay. Then how long did you stay with TRW?
I stayed at TRW till '86,
Okay. So
20 years.
you
Yeah,
had
I had
extended.
20 years seniority when I left there. And I left there because it was a small parts plant. They did not make a lot of money. You know, it was okay to start,
Mm-hmm.
but when I left there, I think we were making like $12 an hour, which we hadn't had a raise in like the last 2 contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So I had gone back to school. I went my GI Bill. I got my bachelor's degree from Wayne State.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to do that because that was leading me toward social work.
Mm-hmm.
Always liked working with my hands, so I went back to school to be an electrician.
Okay.
And while I was in school to be an electrician, that's when BASF offered me a scholarship. So I got a scholarship through BASF, and I went to work for them in '86
Mm-hmm.
and worked until I retired.
Okay. And what brought you to West Michigan?
West Michigan. The girl that I took to the prom in '66 before I went to Now brought me here.
Okay. All right. To look back at the time that you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you, or what did you take out of it?
It gave me a lot of discipline. It gave me a lot of tenacity to complete what I wanted to complete. I think because of my wounds, I was more determined than most people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could have given up at any time. You know, because of it, I played semi-pro basketball. Because of it, I went back to school to become an electrician and did that for almost 20 years too.
Mm-hmm.
Very successful in that. But it also gave me some down, some negative. The PTSD, of course the injuries. I've had arthritis since '69, okay? Have had pain in my left arm and wrist, and I've had 13 surgeries. I mean, there's been some negative stuff, but I think because of my outlook, I was determined not to let that stop me.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
what kinds of issues did you have just adjusting to civilian life? Because you're talking about the PTSD. I mean, how did that affect you?
Well, for a lot of years, you know, because of my determination, I was determined to go back to school. So I had a full-time job. I was raising a family. Early on, I had 2 sons and a wife, but I was going to school. Because I needed more money, I also started a remodeling business with a guy that I work with, because I work midnights most of the time, which gave me opportunity to work that during the day, go to school in the evening. It gave me a lot of push, but it took me away from my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did it all because I had PTSD. I felt like the more I was busy, the less I had to concentrate on any of those issues, although I didn't know what they were at the time. In between all that, I played basketball and I drank. I drank a lot. So I look back now and how did you do that? I don't even know.
Now, at what point did you start to deal with the PTSD or recognize it, or?
I started dealing with PTSD in 2005.
Okay.
I retired from BASF in 2002 when I was 55. I had always promised myself, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but when I was in my 30s, I said, I'm going to retire when I'm 55. Because I saw too many guys retiring at 65 or older and going home and sitting down, and they die in a few years. That's not going to happen to me. Fortunate for me, I ran into a lot of good people at BASF that taught me how to invest, how to take advantage of the 401k. Plus, I had a pension coming from there, too. So I was very fortunate that way. So what I did, I pretty much just kind of relaxed a little bit after I retired, and that's when I started having the nightmares. The day I retired, I was in a rear end collision. A guy totaled my Jeep.
Wow.
He hit me in. I was sitting at a red light, which caused me to have some more ruptured disc in my neck. In 2004, that came to pretty bad end because I went to the hospital because I had pain, and usually I had pain in my left arm, I had pain in my right arm. And the doctor told me that my vertebrae was closed around, there was no space. So you need surgery. So I had surgery in 2004 on my neck, where they put in plate on both sides. And I went into deep depression after that, almost 18 months.
Oh.
And in 2005, right after Katrina, I told my nephew, I was still living in Detroit then, I said, look, take me to the VA. Something is wrong.
Yeah.
And I started getting treatment for PTSD in 2005. Learned what it was and all that, started going to groups and seeing a psychiatrist at the VA in Detroit and at the Vet Center in Detroit. And from there, led me to here.
And now you work with other veterans to try to help them?
Yeah.
What kinds of things are you involved with, or what groups do you work with?
Well, I run a group, a vet-to-vet group on Tuesday night.
Okay.
I go to a Vet Center group here on Tuesday afternoon. I'm a peer support specialist, so I counsel vets. Once vets find out that I can do counseling, and the reason I do it independently is because I'm not under the VA's rules and regulations, so I can pretty much do what I want to do with them. My hands aren't tied. So a lot of them like the counseling that I give, because I'm free. So, and I get a lot of them.
Yeah. And have you talked much with younger veterans, people coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan?
I got a guy right now from Afghanistan. He's 28, really messed up. I mean, really messed up. But hopefully he'll get better.
All right. Well, you've done really a pretty remarkable job of working through an awful lot of difficult stuff, and some of it is maybe just who you were, what's in you. I mean, if you were putting people's guts back inside of them on that hillside at Docto, I mean, something about you kicks in to make it work, but it makes for a very good story, and I just want to thank you for coming in and sharing it today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad to do it.